Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on January 18th, 2016. In this chapter, we have been wiring our tab application up to our tab library, and as of the last episode, that is done. We now have a working tab application. It is completely working. There are no more errors coming out of this. As a reminder, in the last episode, we talked about what do you do when you find a bug in code that you've test driven. And the answer to that is you fix it. But that's not all. See the last episode for more details. But we did fix that, and we are pretty much done. There's just one more thing that is bothering me, and that is related to a question of design. Specifically, our index.html and our app.js are not very cohesive. And what that means is that when I make a change to the index.html, if I change these IDs, the application will break, and that is not at all obvious from looking at this code. Before we get into this, I want to describe 3 rules of design that I find extremely helpful to keep in mind at all times. They are: don't repeat yourself, decoupling, and cohesion. Let me go through each one of these in detail. You've probably heard of the dry principle before, or don't repeat yourself. And a lot of people will say it, describe it as you shouldn't have duplication in your code. But the dry principle is a bit more sophisticated than that, and there is sophistication here that I think a lot of people miss. The core idea behind don't repeat yourself is what Kent Beck described as once and only once. Every concept in your code needs to have one place in the code base where it's implemented, and only one place. So one of the key ideas here is that if there's a new concept that is important to your code, make sure it has a place. And then make sure that there's only one place where that happens. So there's more to this than just, is our code duplicated? It's really about every major idea in your application needs to have a spot. And I think you'll find that if you do this, that duplication is less likely. Often when people talk about duplication of this kind, they're really looking at sort of the more mechanical duplication like what we have here. And that is something to consider. But I think the important part for broader design concerns is your duplication of concepts and making sure that an important concept is represented, because if it isn't represented, if it doesn't have a spot, then it ends up sort of smearing around throughout your application, and that will lead to the sort of more common kind of duplication, but also a kind of duplication that can be hard to see without experience. Second rule, decoupling. When the implementation of a concept changes, remember every concept has a spot where it's implemented. When the implementation of a concept changes, unrelated concepts code shouldn't have to change. So if I change, for example, the body text of this HTML here, I shouldn't have to change my tabs library. That's decoupling, because these are important concepts. One is about handling tabs. The other is about what we display on the screen. They're not at all related, so we can change them without one affecting the other. Third design principle, cohesion. When two concepts are related and they are changing together, then their implementations need to be located near each other in the code base. So if you have two concepts that are related and you're seeing that they do change together, you should expect that they are located close to each other. And that is what we are failing at here. We have the concept of what a content tab is called and what a tab is called, what a content area is called and what a tab is called. And we have the concept of making those something that can be changed, can be switched back and forth. And if these two things change, if this ID changes, then this ID also has to change. These two things change together, but they're not located next to each other in the code base. They're in completely different directories, and there's no way by looking at the code that you can tell that they're closely related. So cohesion is about making it obvious from looking at the code that two things have to change together. And that's what we're failing at in this code. One last little definition for you. What is a concept? Well, it's some nameable idea that's important to the solution that you're implementing. That's kind of obscure, and that's where the judgment part of software design comes in. But we have the concept of wiring our app up to the tab library. We had the concept of switching tabs, and that's handled by our tab library. We have the concept of what we display on the page. Are those great concepts? No, but this is a very simple application, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'll admit I might be reaching a little bit. For more complicated applications, though, there definitely are concepts that you can really point at and say, this is important. And it's even better if the concept that's important to the solution is also important to the problem. And one way of doing that is called domain-driven design, which is a great concept too advanced for us to talk about in this series here. But if you're interested in more, check out this book right here, Domain-Driven Design by Eric Evans. It's a good one. All right, so 3 design principles: don't repeat yourself, decoupling, and cohesion. And where we're failing in our code is on cohesion, specifically regarding these IDs right here. They are closely related between our index page and our app. If one changes, the other also has to change, but they are not at all cohesive. They're in different directories. They're not close to each other, and they're not discoverable. You can't tell from looking at the code as an outsider that these two things need to change together. So I'd like to fix that. So there's a couple of ways to do this. One of the more sophisticated ways to do it would be to take the IDs out entirely and use something like a data attribute to provide a signal to our application about what tabs need to be picked up. But I thought about doing that in this series, but I think that would make things too complicated, so we're not going to do that. A simpler way to do this would be simply to bring this code out of a separate app.js and put it directly in our source code. Now the two concepts are close together. Nice and easy. It's not perfect, but it's better. If we're going to do this, we need to no longer defer the bundle.js because we need it to be loaded before this script executes. So it's just that simple. All we have to do is delete the app and we are good to go, right? Well, not exactly. Our tests will still run, and that's because we're not doing any smoke tests. So our tests are passing, but that's because we're not actually testing the wiring up of our index.html. But if I try to run this, you can see that when it builds it, the Browserify build fails. It's saying it can't find app.js in Browserify, which is fair. We got rid of it. Let's go ahead and pull up our Jake file. For those of you who are just joining us or who don't remember, we have this run target here that builds our distribution directory, which you can find up here, generated dist. And the way that works, and then it runs a little HTTP server. The way the build works is it deletes the distribution directory, copies all of our content in, and then uses a tool called Browserify to take all of our JavaScript and bundle it together into one file, which is this bundle.js. And the way we do that is we say run the Browserify entry point against app.js and use bundle.js as our output. App.js doesn't exist anymore, so now we need to say tabs.js is where we're going to start. That now works, but when we run it, you're going to see that require is not defined. That's because Browserify by default just bundles your code together into one big thing, but it doesn't make it something you can require. So if we look in our index.html, what's failing is this line right here. So what we need to do is modify our Jake file so that we call Browserify a little bit differently. And the instructions are here in the Browserify documentation. This is what they call an external require. The way we do it is with the -r command option, and then we add colon and the name of the module to the end of our file. So once we do that, if we say -r, blah, 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 tabs, colon tabs, and for some reason you have to put / at the beginning of this, just like you would for a regular require, otherwise it will not work, which is a little frustrating. Once you do that, this should now work. So let's bring up our tabs library. No, it's saying cannot find module /tabs.js. That's because I called it tabs. I could have called it /tabs.js, but that just seems kind of weird to me. So I'm going to call it tabs, and then here we can require tabs. So let's go ahead and give that a try. And there we go. Everything is working. And with that, I think we have fixed the cohesion problem that I was concerned about with our code. Again, cohesion is about when things change together, having them physically close together. Part of the reason for that is just that so that when somebody who's new to the code reads the code, they're more likely to see what the things that need to change. So here, by putting this tab 1 here and here, they're closer together. Now, it would be even better if there was only one place that this word tab 1 was used, but that would require more advanced techniques like generating our HTML from a template. We're not doing that here. And with that, our tabs library and our tabs application is done. We have successfully finished this exercise. And as I said at the beginning, this is not a particularly hard problem. It is something that we could have just banged out in a little bit of time by searching on Stack Overflow or something. But the point here is not so much about what we're doing as about giving you the tools to do this level of quality development with any problem that you come across. That brings us to the end of the chapter, but I still have one more chapter to share with you. It's going to be a bit of a graduation ceremony. We're going to talk about some advanced ideas and where to go next. Your exercise for this episode is to go ahead and deal with this cohesion issue, bring the tabs script into the index.html, and modify your Jake file accordingly. Again, what you have to do is add this line, modify your browserify to have the -r and the colon tabs in it. And if you do that, it should all work just fine. If you're doing the challenge exercises, one simple one would be to just take a look at some other code you have written and think about those 3 design principles. Don't repeat yourself, decoupling, and cohesion. See if there's any opportunities you can find to improve it. A more advanced exercise, if you're really looking for a challenge, is to consider how to decouple or how to make this code cohesive without putting a script in the body of the page. There are ways of improving security on the web that involve preventing scripts from running within pages. That can be valuable. It's something that some people might want to do. But if you were to do that, this approach to cohesion wouldn't work. So think about how you could make the code cohesive without having the script in the page. It's a pretty big challenge. Go ahead and give it a try if you like. If not, that's fine too. Next time, we're going to start our final chapter. Thanks very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.